Hello students, myself Professor Hardika Menghani. In today's Python programming, we will be going through the concepts of exception handling in Python. So this is the outline in which through which we'll be going during the whole video. Introduction to what is exception handling, different types of exceptions in Python, difference between error and exception, try and except statement, catching a particular specific exception, try else clause, finally keyword, and raising the exception. Now, what is exception? Exception, we can say it is an abnormal condition which hampers the regular flow of your program. There is certain disruption created into the result of the regular flow of the program. Python has many inbuilt exceptions which force your program to give the error output an error when something wrong goes with it. That means when you are going somewhere wrong, the output would be generated as an error. It won't give you the actual result that you wanted because there is something wrong with the flow of the program. Now there are different types of exceptions in Python. Syntax error. Syntax error means when certain semicolon or something is misspelled into the script that we are writing. Type error is the error when you are trying to add the data which is not of the particular data type. You are trying to add string into the integer, then it is a type error. Name error when a certain name, variable name or the function name is not found, then it is called name error. Index error when in the list or the tuple or any other sequence you are trying to find out the index which is not present in the range, then it is an index error. Key error when you are trying to find a certain key in the dictionary which is not present in the dictionary. Value error when you are having certain invalid argument and you are trying to fetch that value, then it is a value error. Zero division error when you are trying to divide the number by 0. So error and exception, what is the basic difference? Error, syntax error says that if there is certain misinterpretation or misspelled keyword into the script that we are writing, or some colon or semicolon is missing into the syntax, then it is known as a syntax error. Exception means what? When certain logical error comes into the picture. The syntax is totally correct. The code is written in a correct way, but the output won't be as it is to be generated. Then it will be the logical error where the normal flow of the program has not been maintained, and such cases are known as the exceptions. So how to handle this exception? It is necessary to handle the exception, else we won't be able to handle our program and the desired result won't be achieved. So how to handle the exception? So here we handle the exception by the try except statements which are used to catch and handle it. The statement that can raise the exception are kept into the try clause, where we know that, okay, these are the probable statements that might throw the exception. They are to be kept in the try clause, and when they give a certain type of exception, then that would enter into the except part, and whatever we want to get as an output when the exception is handled, we can get it through the except part. Let's try with an example. Here we will be performing the practical with the online GDB compiler. You can use any of the online compiler. You can also install Python and use the Python with any of the IDEs also. Let's run it. So we have got an error over here. The error says let's check once more. There was an indentation error previously. We just cleared that indentation error. Keep in mind that whenever you copy your code from anywhere in Python, the indentation errors are likely to be generated. See, now here in this first statement, we were trying to fetch A1. Arrays are always starting from 0th index. So this is 0, A1, A2. 3 is A2. So here we got the output, that is second element. Second element we got over here. Now when I tried to go to the fourth element is not at all present in our array. So it threw the exception over here. The try block threw the exception over here. To handle the exception, there was an except block, and whatever was written in the except block came as an output over here to us. So that we come to know that, okay, there are some statements in the try block that are trying to throw the exception. That means there is some logical error. So by running this, we can come to know where the error might be, and we can solve that error so that we can get the desired output. And we can also specify an error occurred as array index out of bound. Suppose if you want the user to get more clarity that where the issue is, you can write it in this way. So the user would come to know, okay, my first print statement is working properly. As soon as I entered into second print statement, it went to the exception and it is saying that array index is out of bound. So maybe there is some issue over here in this print statement. So that is to be cured. So this is how the exception can be handled in the Python using try and except. Now, moving further, this was general exception that we are trying. Supposingly, we know that there is certain specific exception, like there is index error or value error, that are the inbuilt exception. So we can specify the name of the error with the except block, and we can perform the relative statement with it. Let's understand with an example. Here we have taken a function in which we are calculating the value. We have given one name error and one zero division error. Whichever respective error will be generated, that respective except block will be executed. Let's perform. Always check the indentations. In the try, we are trying to call the function. Now, except statement. So we have taken two different specific exceptions, zero division error and name error. Let's run it. Again, there is certain indentation error over here. See, so zero division error occurred. Why? Because here what I was trying to do, function 3. So here I am doing a minus 3. When this 3 will be passed, the value of a would change. A is less than 4. So 3 is less than 4. Okay. Then it will be trying to divide 3 by 3 minus 3. That is 0. So that is a zero division error. So it specifically found that which one of the two is the zero division error, and whatever is written into that except statement is performed over here. Supposingly, it is not that it is due to the sequence. Even if I change the sequence and I run the program, still it will give zero division error because it tries to find logically that which of the respective exception is to be performed. So this is how a specific exception can be performed. If in case the zero division error was not given over here, so we can also create a default except statement. We can also create a default except statement that when it is not been able to find any specific error, suppose there is one more error, index error or value error. There is one more error, value error, but our error is basically of zero division. So it will first try to find the respective main specific error into the exception. If not, then it will execute by default the regular except statement. So this is how the catching of the specific exception occurs. Now try and else block. The else clause says in the try and except that the code entered in the else block is done only if the try block does not raise an exception. If the try does not raise an exception, then only else block will be generated. If the try raises the exception, then it will enter into the except portion of the try except block. Let's see. Over here, we have created our try block, our except block, and our else block. Suppose in try, there is some result that throws exception. Then in such case, what will happen? From try, the whole portion will be redirected to this except block. But suppose there is no such error occurred in the try block, then the else block will be executed. So let's see. Okay. In the first one, 2 and 3. So A is 2, B is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5 divided by. So we got the result over here. We got it printed. But when I am doing 3 by 3, so this is 3 plus 3 divided by 3 minus 3. So that becomes divided by 0. It is a zero division error. So instead of executing the else block, here we saw, let's consider it like this. Else block for your better understanding. And we have printed variable C. Okay. So you will understand when the try doesn't throw the exception, else block is executed. When the try throws the exception block is executed. In the first one, the try doesn't throw the exception because the division is done A minus B, that is 2 minus 3, that is minus 1. So the else block is executed. But in the second one, it is 3 minus 3, that is 0. So the exception has occurred. Thus, the zero division exception is being handled over here. In such case, the else block won't be executed. So in simple language, it says if the try block goes successful, else block will be printed. If the try block throws an exception, then the except block will be printed. So this is how try and else statement works in Python. Now moving further with the finally keyword. So what is finally? Irrespective of whether the exception occurs or not, whatever is written into the finally block will be 100% executed. Python gives us a finally keyword which says that whatever is there into the finally block, it will be 100% executed. So let's put this over here. We're trying to take the value of n from the user and then print the value of k. Suppose exception is if the user enters the value of n as 0. So we need to keep the exception so that if the user enters 0, then the exception is thrown. So let's run the program. Enter the value of n. Suppose I enter the value of n as 2. Then 2 pi divided by 2, that is 2.5, but it is not giving the point value as this is integer. So we got the output 2. Okay. 2. And this finally block was still executed even we didn't go to except block. Our try was successful. There was no exception. So it printed the value of k and then it went to the finally block. Now again if I run it and I enter the value of n as 0, in such case there will be an exception because any number cannot be divided by 0. So it went to the exception block and still whatever was written in the finally got executed. In else, there was a condition that if the try is successful, then else will be printed. If the try goes to exception, then else won't be printed. But when I am talking about finally, even if the try is not successful, then also the finally will be executed even after handling the exception. So this is how finally keyword works. Now coming to the raising the exception. Till now whatever we saw was the inbuilt exceptions that we have and how we work with that. Now suppose I want to raise my own exception. That means there is no such exception present in the inbuilt way of the Python, but I want to let the user be aware of adding such data or creating such mistake. So I raise the exception on my own. Suppose I want to give the number specifically between 0 to 100. I don't want the number less than 0 or more than 100. So I create my own exception, that is raising the exception. How? Let's understand. Here I have created my own program that raises the exception. Copy. Yes. In the X, we are taking the value from the user that should not be less than 0 or more than 100. If it is less than 0 or more than 100, then we do not have any inbuilt exception for the same. We don't have any inbuilt exception that says that the number shouldn't be less than 0 or it shouldn't be greater than 100. So I created my own exception. I raised my own exception using the raise keyword. And in the except, I gave the name exception. That whenever such thing happens, raise the exception and print this is an exception. And print this is an exception. Else, If this doesn't happen, then the else block will be executed. If the number is between 0 to 100, then the else block will be executed. Let's run. Enter the number between 0 to 100. I entered 5. 5 is in 0 to 100. So our else block is executed. See. Let's run again. I entered the number 5. 5 is between 0 to 100. So the else block is executed, that the value of x is 5. Now, supposingly I run and I give the value as 101, 1001 or 101. Then in such case, there is an exception that has been raised over here, because there is no such inbuilt exception, but my condition says that the value should be between 0 to 100. So I created my own exception and I raised my own exception, and whatever I wanted to print, that whatever is the exception, I gave that value x over here in the exception, and that was printed in my output. That exception 101. I entered 101, exception 101. Supposingly, I entered the number as -20. Then this is an exception. It went to the exception block, that it raised an exception. And what exception was raised? It went over here and printed this line, exception -20 was raised. So this way I can create my own exception also using raise exception into the Python. Thank you, students. Once we'll see, I guess all the topics are clear. What is exception? Abnormal situation in the program results into the exception. There are different inbuilt exceptions in the Python. Difference between error and exception. Exceptions are logical errors. Try, except, and block, that is to catch the exception. When you want to catch a specific exception, you need to mention the error, the inbuilt exception name. Try with else, that if the exception does not arrive, then the else block can be executed. Finally, irrespective of whether the exception arrives or not, finally block will be executed. Raising the exception, when I do not have any inbuilt exception of a certain type, I can create my own exception using the raise of the exception, using the raise keyword. So this is about briefing about the exception handling in the Python. Hope your basic concepts would be clear. Thank you, students. Have a good day.